Good evening, I'm Mithril Zenith, and my past experience with Conquest is complex. I first played it in 2016, going into Lunatic because I had just come off a hard Birthright run that was far too easy, only to consistently run into brick walls of difficulty and eventually have to recruit other players' Corins to finish. I then played it again in 2019 in the lead up to Three Houses, again on Lunatic, getting further this time without outside help, but still getting walled on the final map because of a lack of proper preparation. I did not come away with a good final opinion of the game from either of these runs. I thus have historically disliked the game, but have recently been challenged to see it in a different light. A third run, also on Lunatic because I got to the end by myself last time, but this time with help. Guidance from a friend and some members of my community, helping me navigate the parts of the game that I didn't fully understand in order to have the smoothest possible experience. Today, we're going to talk about this third run, my feelings on the game as I played it, the things I found that I either enjoyed more than I expected, or that I still disliked even with a better understanding of how they fit into the whole game. So without further ado, let's get into it. I skipped the majority of Conquest's story on my third playthrough. I was here to overcome my issues with its gameplay, not with its story. And while I can appreciate what they were trying to do, my stance remains that the execution of those things is convoluted and poorly written. I don't want to open the rabbit hole of localization, but let's just say that I have my doubts that the end result that we have is solely the responsibility of Treehouse, like some have argued, and move on. After talking about my past runs and why they failed, a key component of that boiled down to my Corin. That was just a bad, poorly built unit. So my friend gave me a game plan. Make a Magic Boon Luckbane Corin with Dragon Talent, sweep the early game with Felicia pair-up and a Dragonstone, switch to Wyvern with that first or second Heart Seal, backpack him with Gunter for the rest of the game, then follow a reclass plan to get a particular set of stats and skills to guarantee a one round of the final boss, while keeping hold of enough Rescue Staves and Heart Seals to have a guaranteed solve for endgame. I will say this plan worked, and I am grateful for it, but it still left me with some caveats and revealed things about the game that I don't think are flaws with the game so much as with my personal preferences pushing me away from enjoying it. I needed the game plan to avoid feeling lost. The reclassing in Fates is open enough, particularly with Corin, to provide enough options and possible paths that it is very easy to doubt every decision you make. I felt this way when I was asked if I wanted to use Wyvern Elise or Archer Mozu, only to be told that by buying a Javelin for Effie and Silas to share at the first available moment, I locked myself out of buying the Heart Seal as early as possible, thus screwing over both of these potential avenues. The difference that one chapter can make. But, by adhering strictly to the game plan, I also felt trapped. I was constantly referring back to my friend, asking when I should change classes, wondering if it was worth using a stat booster or a heart seal, or on someone else, but saving it if I didn't absolutely need it to beat a chapter, and in the end probably wasting most of my stat boosters because they weren't actually all that necessary anyway. I'll talk about this later, but in locking myself into preparations for the future, I sacrificed at least some elements of freedom and power in the moment. For instance, I had 4 boots from the path bonuses and gameplay sitting in my convoy for the majority of the game, and in the end, I didn't even need 3 of them. Lunatic Conquest, more than any other Fire Emblem game outside of maybe Lunatic New Mystery, requires meticulous planning of a run before committing to anything. And I just don't like playing that way, because I become acutely aware of what I'm missing out on long before the fruits of what I've chosen materialize. The parts of Fire Emblem that I most enjoy are the early to mid-game stumbling with a ragtag group of units you're trying to train, despite not being sure that any of them will be making it to the final cut, using each one to play a role that they were clearly designed for, but that you're unsure if they will be able to pull off successfully. This is why I love Fire Emblem 1, Fire Emblem 6, Sethless Fire Emblem 8, the Dawn Brigade chapters in FE10, and the concept of New Mystery. It's the moment-to-moment and map-to-map tactics that I love about most Fire Emblem games, not the campaign-long unit building, support pairing, money spending, and reclassing strategy. And that's not to say Conquest doesn't have these tight tactical moments in its campaign. The game is full of moments like that, where you're assembling your team, and even later on there are plenty of roles for filler units and backpacks to play. I'm not saying that every unit needs a super build to be viable long term in this game, like they do in Awakening Lunatic Plus. They don't. But the method in which the endgame requires long-term planning in Conquest feels fundamentally different from other Fire Emblem games in a way that I personally don't enjoy engaging with as much as in a tactics-based game, even though I know that a lot of players enjoy the long-term run planning angle. Heck, I'll even give Conquest praise for its relative mastery of something I consider critical for enjoyable strategy games: nested goals. If you watched my video on Terraformers, this is exactly what I appreciated most about that game. Its ways of giving you an immediate, short, mid, and long-term goal so you never feel lost despite having such an overwhelming number of potential choices. While I don't think Conquest has quite that level of intuitive learning and guidance that something like Terraformers does, it also has several layered goals that often compete against each other. You want to beat every map. You want to funnel experience into certain units, but you also want to train weapon ranks on your stronger units. You want to grind support ranks between specific units, but the game functions better with all your units close together for rallies and auras, making it harder to guarantee maximum support speed for your desired pairings. You then might want to reclass for specific skills, but sometimes those classes take away your best weapons or don't line up well with the challenges of a particular map. This web of layered competing goals is a complex puzzle to solve that can help make every playthrough feel unique and planning every run feel interesting, despite the level of planning and foreknowledge that has to go into making your run succeed in the first place. To illustrate my point, I was trying to pair Odin and Elise, while leveling Odin and Samurai for the last 2 levels to get Vantage, but I didn't realize that Elise getting supports with other units just by standing next to them to buff them was actively slowing down her support growth with Odin, turning Ophelia from a unit that I could have gotten fairly early on into one that I only picked up by chapter 21 or 22. That said, I was able to use this extra time to power grind Elise to a level 15 tactician, giving Ophelia the inspiration skill, a much stronger version of the demoiselle she was set to inherit had I gotten her earlier. Give and take, competing goals, and that ability to turn short-term setbacks into new long-term plans. Despite the frustration that I had in the moment over all the ways Conquest obscured the support gain information or made my goals arbitrarily harder to achieve, I still appreciated the way they eventually interacted to provide me with this rewarding journey. Now we get to the part of the video that is truly complicated to discuss, the map design and turn-to-turn gameplay itself. Conquest's map quality is, frankly, all over the place. And when I say that, I mean that in as many ways as I can. Some maps have intense time pressure, others let you fully relax and set up perfect engagements every time. Some maps are gimmicky as hell, while other maps are about as plain as you can get. Some maps, the easiest way is to bypass whole swaths of enemies, others force you to deal with the vast majority of foes every time. Some have valuable side objectives that are fun to get to, others have either nothing of value to worry about, or make it so oppressively difficult or unfair to get those that you're better off pretending that they don't exist in the first place. To illustrate my point, chapters 8, 10, 12, 13, and 16 make solid use of time pressure in ways that push you into the enemy without the ability to always set up ideal encounters. Chapters 9, 13, 17, 18, 22, 24, and 26 make use of reinforcement traps to keep you on your toes and able to pivot at a moment's notice. Chapters 19, 21, 25, and Endgame use map gimmicks to create situations that demand particular solutions to them, with varying levels of forgiveness if you don't have a guaranteed solution. A common theme of my recent run was that I constantly had to fight the urge to split up my army or rush to fight every turn. Particularly in chapters 11, 14, 20, 23, and 26, I had to take several turns at various times where I just waited around with most of my units in preparation for a single turn where every single unit's action was critical for success. Unlucky misses had to be compensated for with lucky dodges or total pivots of the plan. Having enough units capable of taking an extra hit in a pinch was often just as valuable as having a unit who could reliably defeat a difficult enemy with minimal assistance. Placement of units for auras, rallies, pair-up attacks mattered in almost every engagement. I almost never completed a chapter on my first attempt, and several maps almost broke my desire to continue. If I hadn't already committed to the run, I probably would have given up the game on chapter 8. It was just that right level of annoyingly difficult and reliant upon the mild RNG of not missing decently high percentage attacks that it took me over a dozen attempts to solve, and at multiple times, my frustration caused me to put the game down for the rest of the day and come back later. How you feel about Chapter 8 on Lunatic will probably be predictive of how the majority of the rest of the game will make you feel, so keep that in mind. As for the common allegation that Conquest is the epitome of skill Emblem, loading its enemies with abusive skill combos that require memorizing every enemy to progress, upon replaying the game I find that largely untrue. Sure, Conquest puts more skills on its enemies than most games outside of Awakening, and these skills can be incredibly impactful. But a majority of enemies in this game, even on Lunatic, only have 1 or 2 skills, and they are more used to direct the player to tackle enemies in specific orders or with particular units than they are to hard counter the player as a whole. Enemy skills don't begin to get truly egregious until the last 3 chapters in the game, at which you start regularly seeing the infamous enemy-only skills that stack infinite debuffs, give staves massively increased range and infinite uses, or particularly cruel setups like Hans's crew of counter-magic generals and berserkers, or the exploding infinitely spawning reinforcements of Endgame. The worst part of the game has to offer is incredibly back-loaded, leaving a lasting impression on anyone who plays the game, despite a majority of the maps not actually having that particular issue. Conquest is a game about creating a desired setup for a run, then navigating the maze of every chapter along the way, trying to set that up. If you enjoy both the long-term planning of how to make different units fit the various roles your army needs, and the moment-to-moment difficulty of having to plan out every move and fight for every step, then you have at least the mindset to potentially enjoy Conquest. At bare minimum, Lunatic will require your patience with the moment-to-moment gameplay and your willingness to follow a long-term plan even if you didn't come up with the plan yourself. If you enjoy the planning but not necessarily the moment-to-moment gameplay, then you'll probably want to either reduce the difficulty or maybe play Revelations. Okay, I didn't know quite where to put this, but I do want to mourn the loss of the online systems and fates because the game was clearly designed around my castle. The online features of Fates were all supplementary, and were reduced in effectiveness in Conquest, but they still played a key role in the core design and gameplay loop of the game. Between every map you play, you are brought back to my castle, a customizable hub that can use Dragon Vein points, or DP, to build and upgrade buildings like shops or jails to get daily rewards from. This mobile gamification puts certain desirable things, like recruiting captured units or stockpiling enough ore to upgrade your weapons, behind a seemingly arbitrary real-time wall. However, that is a vestigial system now missing its intent, because what you were meant to do was visit other players' castles in between missions to farm their ores, see what they were doing with their units, maybe battle them or spend gold to buy skills off them, which in turn would pass virtual time in your castle and allow you to harvest your own resources or persuade your own prisoners again. This is why you get randomly assigned 1 ore and 1 food, and cannot switch or get more. You were meant to be part of an online ecosystem designed to starve you out of the necessary, niche, tertiary resources that you needed for optional but still beneficial rewards to push you into interacting with other players, thus making the game community feel more alive and interconnected, even though in the end, the top visited and battled castles were always hacked to have every resource and the most desirable skills available to buy for minimal effort. In addition, as you visited and battled other players, you would gain VP and BP, visit points and battle points, global points shared between runs that gave you access to extra bonus items from gems to tonics to difficult to obtain weapons and stat boosters. This was the only way to get many of the Hoshidan weapons, like the Guard Naginata or Sunrise Katana, in Conquest, and vice versa for Birthright. I bring this up partly because I'm salty about losing my over 1000 BP and VP from my game simply because the servers are no longer online to verify what I rightfully put in the hours to earn, but also because it's common for many players of Fates to suggest playing modded versions of the game that feature infinite ore and food, or even access to the VP and BP rewards. And while I myself might feel that this goes a bit too far in the opposite direction, I can't help but see where they're coming from. You did effectively have infinite ore and tons of bonus rewards if you put in the time to grind for them, even in the supposedly grind-free Conquest. This goes even further, however, making Revelations a game with permanently capped and shrinking counts of viable available copies, in addition to all the other DLC becoming inaccessible for devices who haven't already purchased it. I understand that this is seen as an inevitability of the entire practice of online multiplayer and downloadable content, but surely there could have been some way to future-proof this. Maybe, for instance, VP and BP could have been stored locally on the card, and only required verification when playing online. Maybe a number of default castles could be cached in the game, like some Pokemon games do, with their default NPC trainers on the battle tower for duos for people without a link cable and friends. Maybe local wireless Street Pass could still be active, for people who wanted to visit and battle their friends locally. I know that we're talking about a game that's over and done with, but future-proofing strategies don't need to be that complicated. We can stop killing games without putting undue pressure on companies to support inevitable expenses in perpetuity. These systems just need to have a bit of forward thinking and future-proofing put into them. At the end of the day, I have grown to appreciate what Conquest is, and I can officially say that I get why so many people like it. There is a lot to like, and I can see myself playing it again in the future when I'm in the mood to try out some builds while getting my teeth kicked in by the map difficulty. There are aspirational goals that exist within this game that go beyond mere difficulty settings, like full clearing chapters 25 and endgame, or going different paths in chapter 26. That said, while it is certainly a game that knows what it's trying to be, particularly in its difficulty, I can still say that it is not a game that will appeal to everyone. It is a particular style of gameplay and difficulty design that some players will click with better than others. The nature of having a diverse set of options with limited resources means that you will always most keenly feel the loss of opportunities you either blindly miss or decide to not take. The need to have specific solutions prepared for certain points in the game inherently narrows the possibility space in an abstract way that the game itself cannot adequately reinforce to the player before it's too late. And the inherent irreplaceability of certain resources, like rescue staves, combined with the moment-to-moment gameplay relying on both perfect placement and some luck in landing hits, means that the game actively fights against your instincts as a player to try to salvage an imperfect attempt, and instead pushes you to just reset entirely on the first mistake or bad roll. Conquest is not a bad game. I do not hate it, and it has proven it does not deserve to be the lowest rated game on my personal tier list. But I will still be hesitant to recommend it to others, and will need to be in the right mood before playing it again. Thank you so much for listening to the review though. What are your thoughts on Conquest? Let me know if I got anything horribly wrong, or if this has maybe swayed you to give it another shot in the comments down below. Like the video if you appreciated it, sub to the channel if you want to see more, and until next time, let me shout out my channel members, the LaguzGuard members and Royal LaguzGuard members, who have helped keep me sane and keep me going on this YouTube grind, despite all of the chaos and other things going on in my life. That of course includes Royal LaguzGuard members, the Forgotten L and Minirup, and LaguzGuard members L, Enigmatic Mr. L, Mad Moke, Bro Duderman, Kumi, Miss Mesmerism, Drumstep 913, Relaz 6, Merlinin, and Reely. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.